about this disease. Cyrus, how you doing today, my man?
I'm doing great, and it's always fun to be here with you, so thanks for inviting me back.
Oh, the pleasure is all mine, my friend. And we have a lot of great questions coming in today. A lot of
Great.
these are kind of like, it seems like these are people who may be new to the idea of eating a plant-based diet, but they've had diabetes, and so now they've heard some good things, and now it's time to answer those questions and fill in those gaps. So you ready, my man?
Let's do it. Let's have some fun.
All right, well, the first question comes to us from Sheena. She wants to know, because you and I previously have talked about fat being a real culprit here as opposed to sugar. A lot of fat in coconut meat, so she's wondering, when you eat coconut meat or drink coconut juice, do you also get saturated fat, or does that only apply when it's processed oil, so coconut oil?
Ooh, very, very, very good question. Okay, so let's talk about saturated fat in particular because it's, fat is it's a complex topic, to be perfectly honest, and I think a lot of it is poorly communicated in the world of health. So, in order to talk about carbohydrates and fat and protein, we have to be like very, very specific in our language. And if you're not, then you run into problems where you sort of get confused and you say, well, this person said this about sugar and this person said this about carbohydrates, and then it becomes confusing. So, first things first. In the world of, let's say, in the world of natural health, there's this sort of common misconception that diabetes and insulin resistance is caused by eating too much sugar. And so you'll hear this over and over again. People say, oh, like, don't eat sugar because it raises your risk for prediabetes and type 2 diabetes, and it raises your risk for obesity, and it raises your risk for fatty liver disease and Alzheimer's disease, right? And the truth is that all that information is correct as long as you're referring to refined sugar, okay? So you cannot use the word sugar by itself. You got to put the modifier in front of it. You got to say refined sugar, which is white table sugar, high fructose corn syrup, processed sugars that you get from the grocery store that are inside of the packaged products that you're eating and may not even know. Okay? But when you're referring to another thing that people say all the time is they say, "Oh, don't eat fruit because fruit contains sugar." And that right there, as soon as I hear that, I say, "No, no, 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 stop. Can't say that. Can't say that," because fruit contains carbohydrates that are whole. So fruit contains whole carbohydrates, and the whole carbohydrates are broken down into molecules of glucose and fructose primarily. So those molecules of glucose and fructose are actually fuels for your brain, for your liver, for your muscle tissue, and using the word sugar to describe those foods is technically accurate, but it's also very misleading. So instead of using the word sugar, what I like to tell people is no, fruit contains whole sugar or whole carbohydrates. And when you use the words refined sugar and whole carbohydrates, then all of a sudden it starts to become much easier to understand. Same thing is true when it comes to fat. Okay? People say, oh, fat causes obesity, fat causes diabetes. And the truth is that no, 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 no. The consumption of excess fat beyond your physiological requirements is what increases your risk for many chronic diseases. Whether it's diabetes, whether it's heart disease, whether it's obesity, whether it's fatty liver disease, chronic kidney disease, Alzheimer's disease, you name it, okay? So it's not just fat, it's the excess consumption of fat, in particular saturated fat. So the question really here is, well, what is saturated fat? Is it only in coconut oil, or do I get it from the coconut meat as well? And saturated fat as a species of fat, if you will, comes mainly from the animal world. So you get it from red meat, white meat, chicken, fish, eggs, dairy products. That's where those products are very high in saturated fat. And then saturated fat is also found in the plant world. It's found in avocados, nuts and seeds. It's found in olives. It's found in coconuts, and it's found in vegetable oils. Okay. Truth be told, this is factoid. Saturated fat is everywhere. Saturated fat is in lettuce. It's in this banana contains saturated fat, believe it or not. It's just in such a small quantity that it's not really worth talking about. But the foods that do contain, a significant quantity of saturated fat from the plant-based world are, like I said, avocados, nuts and seeds, olives, coconuts, and vegetable oils. Okay? So, if you're taking a coconut and you press the coconut and you turn it into an oil, that's one way that you can consume the coconut. Or you can take the coconut and you can scoop out the meat, and then you can have the coconut meat. Okay? So both of the ways that you consume this are going to contain the same saturated fat content, or very similar saturated fat content, okay? The reason why people gravitate towards coconuts is because you hear this all the time. They say, oh, coconuts contain a medium chain triglyceride, and it functions differently than a long chain triglyceride. And this launched this whole product line called MCT oil, medium chain triglyceride oil. And the truth be told, a lot of this is just pure marketing hype. But what I want you guys to understand here is that coconuts absolutely contain saturated fat. It just happens to be a shorter chain length than you would find in chicken or red meat or dairy products. But just because it's a shorter chain length does not give you the green light to go consume large quantities of coconut and put in large quantities of saturated fat into your body on a daily basis. Because when you do that, you increase your overall chronic disease risk, and that sets you up for long-term, problems in the future.
All right, now here's the ultimate follow-up question from Meg, wondering if sugar isn't the problem, are you really saying that a fatty hamburger is healthier than a candy bar?
Ooh, this is a tough question. I've got this before. It's like, what's the lesser of two evils, right? So I guess we have a hamburger that's like a fatty, oily hamburger on one side, and then we have a candy bar on the other side. Truth be told, I don't know. I don't know which one's worse for you. I could argue that, the candy bar is worse for you. I could argue the hamburger is worse for you. What I will tell you is that the hamburger does present multiple problems. Number one, the hamburger contains a significant amount of saturated fat. Number two, the hamburger contains a significant amount of cholesterol. Number three, the bun on the hamburger is a refined carbohydrate. Okay? And so the only, nutrients, the only foods of value inside of a hamburger, in my opinion, are the lettuce and onions and tomatoes that go between the bun and the patty. Okay? The rest of the patty itself plus the bun plus, the ketchup and mustard and relish, which are all processed foods, none of those have any valuable nutrient, value. So the hamburger presents multiple problems. We got saturated fat, we got the refined carbohydrates, plus we also have cholesterol. The candy bar, it presents multiple problems as well, because candy bars often contain chocolate, as an example, so milk chocolate. So boom, now you got yourself saturated fat. Now you got yourself synthetic white sugar, without question. And then in addition to that, candy bars often have other sugar, versions of sugar, like nougat or caramel or high fructose corn syrup, and these are the things that make it taste really good. So the candy bar just tends to be like more refined from like the sugar area, but it also does contain saturated fat. And then the hamburger presents saturated fat plus cholesterol plus refined carbohydrates. So slice it however you want. You come up with the answer. Which one's worse for you? I say they both kind of are not awesome. So if I were in your position, I would eat neither one of them, and I would just opt for whole foods from the plant-based world as much as humanly possible.
But a plant-based burger, I mean, you can't go wrong. Some burgers, right? So then, let's say the healthier ones, the ones made from beans, as opposed to, say, maybe the Impossible Burger or something like that.
Bingo. Okay. So when it comes to plant-based burgers, just like you're saying, you can go to the store and you can buy a packaged and or processed burger that's either an Impossible Burger or it's a Beyond Meat burger. Those are sort of like two name brands that you find these days. And those burgers, if you actually read the packaging, you'll find that there's a whole bunch of synthetic ingredients in them. And they're effectively made in a laboratory, or, contain a lot of like synthetic laboratory-made ingredients. And they just happen to taste incredibly good. And they taste like a normal burger would. And then you have the other type of burger, which is like a homemade burger that you can make by yourself, which contains, just like you were saying, black beans, chickpeas, sun-dried tomatoes, zucchini. Sometimes I've seen oatmeal put inside of burger patties. So you put together some combination of, again, whole foods. You process them in a way that they turn into a patty. You stick it in your oven, you cook them, and then you take that and you put it onto a burger. Or even better, you take a portobello mushroom. You put a little bit of vinegar on that thing, you put it in the oven, you take it out, you stick it inside of, 2 pieces of whole grain bread, now you have yourself a burger, right? So I would always opt for, just like you're hinting at here, I would always opt for the whole food version over the synthetic version any day of the week. And if you do that, then you're going to consistently be improving your health meal by meal.
That portobello burger sounds like that would hit the spot right about now. I'm not even gonna lie to you, man. My stomach is rumbling, Jack. Charlie, he wants to know, what are your thoughts on sugar-free candy that is marketed to people with diabetes? Is that a healthier option?
No, absolutely not. Absolutely not. There's a number of reasons why I say absolutely not. Because even though, you know, a lot of this like sugar-free or low-fat, these words that you read on the outside of the package, sometimes they say like, you know, protein-rich or like 15 grams of protein, right? It says this is marketing. This is pure marketing. And food manufacturers know that if they put certain keywords and certain phrases on the front of a bottle or the front of a package, that people will buy them, and people will buy them in large quantities. So they do this over and over and over again, and they figure out what are the exact words, what color should the words be in, how big should the words be, where should they be printed, how does someone's eye look at the package, and what are they reading? And this is a science. And so they know exactly what to put on the package to sort of trick you into thinking, they're like, oh, hey, this candy says it's sugar-free. That's awesome. I'm going to buy this. And then you go buy it, and you're like, well, I'm a diabetic, and I'm doing the right healthy thing. Okay? But what they're not telling you is they're not telling you that maybe it's, you know, sugar-free. Like, how do they define sugar, first of all? Because there's no actual definition for sugar. Are they saying that it's white sugar-free? Does it contain high fructose corn syrup? Because some manufacturers don't consider high fructose corn syrup to be a sugar. Does it contain sugar alcohols like sorbitol or mannitol or erythritol? Okay, these are all questions that you got to ask yourself, because there's like many different species of sugar, and until you really like get to the fine print and read the packaging, you're never going to know if there's synthetic, you know, artificial sweeteners inside of your food or not. Okay, so that's the first thing I would say. And then the second thing is that oftentimes, even though something might be sugar-free, okay, let's say it's a candy bar and it's sugar-free, again, we talked about the fact that it's, you know, saturated fat is a problem, right? So they might actually reduce the artificial sugar content of that food, but in the process, they might add more chocolate, okay? And the chocolate might be made with like cocoa butter and or real butter and or margarine, right? And or hydrogenated vegetable oils. And now you're talking about either trans fats or saturated fats, which are known, like evidence-based research demonstrates clearly that trans fats can cause significant cardiovascular problems, and that saturated fat can be a cardiovascular and diabetes nightmare. So if you're reducing your sugar content, but you're putting more of these other trans and saturated fats inside of the food, are you actually getting healthier? I don't think so.
All right, everybody loves the smoothie. It seems like we can never do one of these Q&A shows without a smoothie coming up one time or another. Linda wants to know whether your blood sugar will rise more if you're drinking a smoothie rather than eating the whole fruit.
Yes. So I'm looking down here at this bowl that doesn't look very appetizing at all right now.
No, it doesn't. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah, sorry, maybe I shouldn't have shown. This used to be a smoothie, okay? This used to be a smoothie bowl, and the question is, if you consume a smoothie or a smoothie bowl, does that get sort of like processed quicker than if you're eating the whole fruit? The answer is yes, it absolutely does, okay? So here's a simple way to think about it. When you're consuming a whole fruit, like let's say you take this banana and you decide to put this banana inside of your mouth. It's going to take time for this banana to get broken down by the enzymes in your digestive system. And then it's going to take more time for those nutrients to be absorbed through the walls of your small intestine to get inside of your blood, okay? So I want you to think about whole foods and fruits in this context, because we're talking about smoothies, as being three-dimensional matrices of nutrients, okay? People a lot of the time, they think, oh, banana, it's just a ball of potassium, right? Not even close, not even close. Whole foods are three-dimensional objects that have vitamins, minerals, fiber, water, antioxidants, phytochemicals, carbohydrates, fat, and protein. That is 9 classes of nutrients that you find inside of a simple whole food like that. But we don't talk about it that way. People look at an apple and they're like, oh, that apple's, you know, high in sugar, right? They take a look at a carrot and they go, oh, that carrot's got, you know, vitamin C, right? Or they take a look at an orange, oh, that's vitamin C, right? But the truth is that all whole foods, whether you're talking about a bean or a whole grain or a fruit or a starchy vegetable, every single one of them has all 9 of those classes, okay? And it's important to understand that because the carbohydrate, the fat, and the protein are the macronutrients. These are the ones that actually give you energy. So your body can actually turn the carbohydrate, the fat, and the protein into ATP, and ATP is what cells, it's a cellular form of energy. It's their currency that they use to, they use that for all their sort of internal housekeeping and to stay alive, right? Now, in addition to the carbohydrate, the fat, and the protein, there's all these other micronutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the fiber, the water, the antioxidants, and the phytochemicals, okay? The fiber is, think of it like rebar, okay? It's literally like the rebar that you would find inside of like a concrete structure, okay? It's this very complicated mesh that holds the nutrients together, and the nutrients are, again, the carbohydrates, fat, and the protein. Plus all the micronutrients, the vitamins, the minerals, the water, plus the phytochemicals and the antioxidants, okay? So all of these 8 classes of nutrients are locked up inside of this fiber matrix. And that's important because as long as the fiber is present, when you put it in your mouth and it goes into your digestive system, it takes time for your digestive system to get access to those nutrients. Okay? You can't break down the fiber and completely degrade it because humans don't have the enzyme called cellulase that's required to break down the cellulose. The bacteria inside of your large intestine do. And those are the ones that actually eat the fiber. But what your digestive system can do is it can basically start to what's called denature, or like open the three-dimensional object so that the other nutrients can be degraded and can get chopped up into little pieces and then absorbed into your blood, okay? So I want you to think always about whole foods as literally being three-dimensional objects. And when these three-dimensional objects go inside your digestive system, it requires time for them to be able to, for the carbohydrate, the fat, and the protein to be able to enter your blood and then get circulated to tissues. And time is your friend. You want things to take a while because when they do, it leads to a slow rise in blood glucose and a slow rise in amino acids and a slow rise in fatty acids inside of your blood, and that is fine. Now, when you process something, say I took this banana, and I ran it through a blender, and I turned it into a smoothie, and I added some spinach, and maybe I added some acai berries, and maybe I added some cocoa powder, and I turned it into this beautiful, tasty smoothie. Because I've processed it, and I've run it through a blade, and the blade has chopped up the components and turned them into like a slurry, from the moment it hits my tongue and goes into my digestive system, my digestive system has to do less work to get access to those nutrients because they're already partially broken down. And so as a result of that, my glucose and or amino acids and or fatty acids are likely to get inside of my blood faster. So does that mean that you can't ever eat a smoothie? The answer is no, absolutely. I'm a huge fan of smoothies, no question. But one of the things I tell people to do is when you're consuming a smoothie, you do 2 things. Number 1, eat it slowly, okay? Drink it slowly. Rather than just taking the whole thing down and wolfing it in like 10 minutes, make it take half an hour, okay? And by doing that, you're slowing down the rate at which these nutrients get inside of your blood. Number 2, if you can drink a smoothie and have some solid material to come along with it, like some greens, maybe some spinach, maybe some type of celery to go along with it. That will also add fibrous material into your digestive system that'll slow down the rate at which your those nutrients get inside of your blood, and that's a good thing. Okay, so anything you can do to like keep that rate nice and slow is good. And as a result of that, smoothies are a go, but try and balance it with either eating it slower or having actual real food to come along with.
And I feel like after that answer, I need one of those graduation caps, and I need to flip the tassel to the other side because school is in session. Holy cow, man, that was complex. I love it. That was like one of the best answers anybody's given to any question ever on the exam room, man. Thank you.
Perfect. All right, I'm out. I'll see you guys later.
I did. Total mic drop moment. Too bad we still have at least 4 questions to go.
No,
man, we should have saved that one for last. Oh my gosh. Golly, good luck topping that. All right, so we see where do you go from this? Oh my gosh. All right, question from Ian. We've talked a lot about fruit. Let's switch over to potatoes. Interesting one here. Ian writes that he's heard sweet potatoes don't raise blood sugar as much as white potatoes. How could that be when we're talking about a sweet potato?
Okay. So there is something that's very interesting that happens from food to food to food. So you read on the internet, it says sweet potatoes are better for people with diabetes than white potatoes because, again, what they're trying to communicate is that the speed at which the glucose molecules get inside of your blood is slower for a sweet potato than it is for a white potato. And then you will also hear people say things like, a sweet potato is a better option for you than is a banana because a banana is going to get inside of your blood quicker, okay? And the truth is that the speed at which foods get, like a sweet potato versus a white potato, the speed at which those glucose molecules get inside of your blood actually varies from person to person, okay? So the reason that I'm confident in making that statement is because we have a coaching program. In our coaching program, we are coaching thousands of people through the process of integrating a plant-based diet so that they can become more insulin sensitive, aka they can lower the fat content of their diet, lower the amount of fat that's stored inside of their liver and muscle, and make it so that the insulin that their pancreas is producing or the insulin that they inject becomes significantly more powerful and significantly more effective. And that's a good thing because when insulin is powerful in your body, your chronic disease risk drops significantly. So the goal here is target insulin resistance on the head, make yourself insulin sensitive, and as a result of doing that, diabetes tends to fade away and chronic disease tends to fade away, okay? Now, let's go back to the potato, okay? If you have heard that a sweet potato is better than a white potato, that might be helpful information. But the truth is that in our coaching program, when we teach people how to start integrating potatoes into their diet, some people come back to us, myself included, and they say, you know what? If I have as little as 2 bites of a sweet potato, good luck, glucose through the roof, okay? If I have as much as 2 bites of a white potato, totally fine. Glucose, very controllable, right? Other people are the exact opposite. They go, oh yeah, I eat a white potato, glucose through the roof. I eat a sweet potato, I eat a purple potato, glucose very controllable, right? So I would love to have a magic wand where I could just take this wand and I could like put it up against someone and I could be like, oh, okay, cool. You should eat white potatoes and, lower your intake of sweet potatoes because that's what this magic wand tells you. But the truth is that there's a biological individuality from person to person that makes it very hard to predict whether or not this like general advice that sweet is better than white is very hard to interpret, okay? The same type of thing happens from fruit to fruit. Some people find that when they consume bananas, their blood glucose is very controllable. It's not a big deal. And some people find that when they have watermelon, as an example, their glucose goes through the roof and there's nothing they can do to stop it. Okay, other people find the exact opposite. They're like, yeah, I can eat a watermelon all day long, everything's fine. But the minute I have an orange, boom, glucose through the roof, right? And I can be the first, I'll be one of the first people to tell you that individuality from food to food, and then the individuality from person to person, is a real phenomenon. And as a result of that, what I, unfortunately, what I recommend people to do is they have to sort of like start simply and then expand their diet over the course of time in a systematic manner. And we have, many products and services in Mastering Diabetes that are designed to help people go through this process. And we just created this thing called a weekly meal plan, which delivers you 21 recipes in your inbox every single week. And that's exactly what we do, is we teach people how to start with a sort of basic collection of foods and then expand the diversity over the course of time. And in that process, you're going to have to be the detective. And you're going to have to figure out, if quinoa makes your blood glucose do weird things, but brown rice doesn't, then maybe you should eat more brown rice and a little bit less quinoa, right? So there's sort of like some experimentation which is required, but it's a very valuable process to go through, because when you really figure it out, then you have a whole menu of foods which control your blood glucose well, and a menu of foods which tend to be problematic. And I wish I could explain the actual scientific mechanism that explains the bioindividuality from one person to another, but I can't right now. And maybe that'll be in a future episode.
Let's do some real talk here for a second. What you just said is critically important, and people do get so frustrated. I've heard this from viewers and listeners of the exam room who say, well, I'm doing everything you guys are talking about, and still my cholesterol is high, still my blood sugar is high. And my heart goes out to them. And one of the things that I always talk to people specific to weight loss is that there is not a one-size-fits-all program here. And it sounds like the same thing applies for diabetes and a lot of other chronic conditions as well. It's about finding what works for you. But don't give up if the first thing doesn't click right into place. I love the way that you term that, as far as you need to be your own detective. Like, that is huge to me. Don't give up, just keep digging.
Absolutely. And the truth is that when it comes to diet and understanding what foods might have what positive or negative effects, like, you and I were never taught this in school, right? Nobody goes through a nutrition detective class and walks away understanding how they can test specific foods for their response, either in the short term or the long term, okay? There are things like a blood glucose meter which can help out for sure, because it gives you like a real-time feedback. There's a continuous glucose monitor will do that. An insulin pump can help you understand that information. But if you're not using any of those devices and you're just sort of an average individual who's, medication and device-free, and you're trying to lose weight or you're trying to lower your cholesterol, it can be challenging because, again, we're not equipped with the right tools, and you don't know what information to gather in order to determine whether or not you're doing something right or doing something incorrect. But the general idea here is start simply. Okay, when I say start simply, I mean find 7, maybe 10 foods in the plant-based world that you really enjoy eating. Okay, so some of those could be fruits, some of those could be beans, some of those could be whole grains, some of those could be starchy vegetables, some of those could be non-starchy vegetables. Doesn't really matter. Let's just say, for the sake of argument, my foods were mangoes, papayas, and plantains. I love those foods. I'll eat those all day long. That's 1, 2, 3. I'm going to add to that chickpeas. I'm going to add to that quinoa. I'm going to add to that broccoli. And then I'm going to add to that, let's do brown lentils. And then that's it. Those are my 8 foods right there. Okay? So what I would do is I would start constructing foods using some combination of those, or start constructing meals using some combination of those foods. And then what I'm looking to learn is, how do I feel? How is my energy level? How is my sleep? How is my digestive process? This is a big one, okay? If every time I eat a meal that contains lentils, I discover that the next morning I have stomach pain and maybe I felt gassy while I was sleeping, then you gotta have to be a detective and be like, wait a minute, let me go backwards in time and figure out what did I do and what am I doing consistently that's giving me that same process? Oh, okay, it's probably the lentils. So then the next thing you do, you pull the lentils out. And then you have that same meal without the lentils in them. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, okay, the problem went away. So that's a good indicator that the lentils might be causing a problem. If that's the case, Take the lentils out and substitute them with something else. Put black beans there instead, right? So there's a little bit of like a detective process, which is required. But the idea here is if you start with a small number of variables and then you increase the diversity over the course of time, if you add foods in one by one, that enables you to better understand and better identify things that could be causing you problems. I'll be the first person to tell you that I've gone through this process for the last 18 years, and there are certain foods that I just literally cannot eat because they'll either cause my blood glucose to go extremely high, or I just can't digest them properly. And you know what? That's okay. It's not a big deal. So what I do is I don't worry about those foods, and instead I focus on the foods that I can eat, and I eat those foods in abundance, and I'm a happy camper.
You don't feel restricted at all? Like, I really wish I could eat that slice of vegan pizza right now, but I know that it's just not going to be any good for me. The way that I kind of look at that is that, well, yeah, that's one food that you can't eat, but there are 18 bazillion others that you can readily enjoy.
So I flip it around every single time. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm human. When somebody's sitting down and they're eating a vegan pizza and it tastes really good and it's got barbecue sauce all over it, like, there's a part of my brain which is like, oh my God, I want to eat that, I want to eat that, I want to eat that, right? But there's a funny thing that happens inside of, your brain and your digestive system, because the two of them are talking at all times. Let's say you're sitting down and you see the vegan pizza and it looks really good and it smells really good. It just came out of the oven and your friends and family are about to eat it and you're just like, wow, God, I want to eat that thing so badly, okay? So let's just suppose that you went and you ate that food and you were like, all right, I'm just going to have a slice. I'm going to have two slices. So you eat that, it's got the crust, right, which is a refined carbohydrate most likely, and then it's got a bunch of vegetables on top of it. It's got a barbecue sauce, which who knows what's in that barbecue sauce. You eat that food, and temporarily you're like, man, that hit the spot. That was great. I really enjoyed that process, right? But then 2 hours later, you recognize you're like, hold on a second, I gotta go to the bathroom. You go to the bathroom, not a fun experience, right? Next morning you wake up and all of a sudden you're just like, man, I feel sluggish. That didn't really feel that good, right? If you go through that process once, twice, 3 times, 4 times, 5 times, who knows how many times it'll take you, but there comes a point at which when you repeat that behavior the next time and you have that pizza again or something similar, and then you get that frustrating digestive process, there will come a point where your brain flips and basically says, you know what? It's tasty, but it doesn't do good things to me. And as a result of that, you are likely to not want to eat that food the 3rd time it shows up or the 5th time it shows up. And so there's this feedback mechanism that happens with your peripheral tissues and your central nervous system. And if you can get in tune with that feedback mechanism, then you start to make decisions that are actually subconscious, where you don't even... think about it. And every time that pizza appears, it's not like you're having a fight with it, being like, oh my God, I really want to eat that thing, I really want to eat that thing. And you see the pizza and you're just sort of like, all right, that's not Cyrus food. That's not Cyrus food. I'm going to focus on this plate of mangoes and garbanzo beans with passion fruit on top of it. And I'm going to enjoy the heck out of this thing. And I could care less about that pizza because this thing is going to work for me digestively. It's going to help me control my blood glucose. It's going to keep my cholesterol low. It's going to give me a lot of energy. I'm going to be able to sleep like $1 million. I'm going to be able to exercise as much as I want. I'm a happy camper.
It took me 27 years to learn that lesson. 27 years, man. But eventually, you're right. The brain just, it flips, and that is a glorious thing. Question from Kiana. This is a really good one. A lot of people can probably use this one. Diabetes runs in my family. My mom, my grandma, my dad, and my brothers all have it, and I feel like I'm just biding time until I, too, have diabetes. How big of a role does genetics actually play in terms of a person's risk of developing it?
Seriously, I think it's that big. It's that important. Literally that important. Okay? I don't want to make things hard to understand here. I don't want to mislead and misrepresent the actual biology. There is such a thing as a genetic predisposition towards autoimmune diabetes, which is what I have, type 1, and then autoimmune type 1.5 diabetes. Meaning, if you have a family member that is living with an autoimmune version of diabetes, your chances of developing it are increased versus the general population. No questions asked. It could be a brother, a sister, a mom, a dad, an uncle, a grandfather, a grandmother, you name it, okay? There's also people who are worried, just like Kiana was saying, that, type 2 diabetes, that runs in my family. My mom had it, my dad had it, my grandfather had it, my sister has it, my brother has it. So therefore, I'm a ticking time bomb, right? The truth is that when it comes to prediabetes and type 2 diabetes and gestational diabetes, the genetic predisposition that you may have is about this important, because you can control your level of insulin resistance, which is the underlying condition that increases your risk for all three of those conditions. You can control insulin resistance every single time you open your mouth. You can fuel insulin resistance by eating the foods I was describing earlier: the saturated fat, the cholesterol, and the refined carbohydrates. Go for it. You eat those foods, insulin resistance will get high, it'll stay high, and as a result of that, your risk for all of these lifestyle versions of diabetes, whether it's prediabetes, type 2, or gestational, goes up. No questions asked. But if you choose to do the opposite, which is eat lower amounts of cholesterol or none, lower amounts of saturated fat, and lower refined carbohydrates or none, if you choose to do that, then what you're doing is you're taking an insulin-resistant state and you're lowering it so that you can either reverse insulin resistance altogether, or you can become extremely insulin sensitive. There's sort of two different ways of explaining it. When you do that, when you reverse insulin resistance, you're literally dramatically lowering your risk for prediabetes, type 2 diabetes, and gestational diabetes. We see this in our coaching program literally every single day of the week. This is the system that Robbie, my co-founder, and I have developed over the course of the last 15 years. It's grounded in 100 years of evidence-based science, and we have practiced it with almost 10,000 people at this point. And I can be the first person to tell you that when you eat to maximize your insulin sensitivity, your genetics are literally this important, and it doesn't matter anymore. It literally doesn't matter. So we've had people who have come through our coaching program, and they are like, "Oh, Cyrus, like, the odds are against me. I'm 120 pounds overweight, and diabetes is in 7 of my family members." And I say to them, I don't really care. I mean, I'm not trying to be insensitive here, but that doesn't really matter. Okay? The cards are not stacked against you. All you have to do is learn how to eat and learn how to be consistent and integrate tools such as low-fat, plant-based, whole food nutrition, intermittent fasting when necessary.
Good job, guys. Stretch longer if you want.